Tennessee Titans at number one. This one I feel like is fairly simple,
Yeah.
Albert. I mean, they need a quarterback. I think in the global picture here, I mean, you lose a good amount over the course of the offseason. You probably need some help on the edge. You need some help on that defensive line. You need extra pieces at wide receiver. There's a lot of stuff that you need, but it starts and ends with getting someone who's not Will Levis back there.
Yeah, and I think like I mean, obviously, like some of their actions in the offseason and the way they've handled the quarterback position in general, I think telegraphs what they're going to do, which we all know. It's 99% Will Howard, unless I don't know some sort of like Laramie Tunsil situation arises. So, like I think Cam Moore's been the. Did I say Will Howard?
Uh, did
God,
you
I'm
say Will Howard? It's just psychosomatic at this point.
I know.
Let's
I
just
think I
mention
might.
him
I don't.
twice.
Yeah. Anyway, Cam Ward. Cam Ward will be the pick, not Will Howard. I'm not that much of a homer. And I'm spaced out a little today too. But yeah, like I like there's everything that they've done this offseason telegraphs. We are going to draft a young quarterback. We are going to play a young quarterback. You look at the overspend on Dan Moore to play left tackle, which allows them to slide JC Latham over to the right side and play his more natural position. Um, it like a lot of things that they've done this offseason set up for them to go and draft a young quarterback and play a young quarterback early. And so they have other needs for sure. I mean, that roster is, is in some level of decay and has been for a while. And the edge rusher thing is definitely a question. I had no doubt about it. I think they could use another corner, another receiver. Like they have plenty of needs, but they'll take care of those needs on Friday and Saturday. And I think we know what they're going to do on Thursday night.
Bad year to need a wide receiver, but the Titans really don't have a wide receiver too,
Yeah.
unless you finally get something out of Traylon Burks, who played in 6 games last year. Lejair Sneed. I mean, that's something where maybe you hope that you finally hit the upside on something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
just the medical with him, like that's
Right.
why the Chiefs let him go in the first place, which is interesting because one of the guys that was a huge part of that trade is now the general manager, you
Right.
know? So like I think, the Mike Borgonzi's gonna have real insight into L'Jarius Sneed and his sort of longevity. But again, those are all questions for Friday night, right? Like, do they go corner, do they go edge rusher, or do they go receiver on Friday night? I think again, we know what they're gonna do on Thursday night.
Jacksonville Jaguars are
Mhm.
next. I think that this team could go in a couple different directions, but I think at the top of the list, and this has driven me nuts for years. And I remember talking to some people down there after last season, and I mean, even since Urban Meyer got there, is anyone going to address the defensive tackle position at this point? You have two seemingly talented edge rushers. They just picked up the fifth-year option on Trevon Walker.
Devon
You
Walker, yep.
have Josh Hines Allen on the other side, but this middle has been a painful void, really, in this
Yeah.
defense for a very long time. You need someone to be able to shut down the run for you. Cornerback. You could say that they need some extra pieces in the offensive line. They really went. I mean, Patrick McCarry doesn't seem like a big signing for Jacksonville in the offseason, but it was interesting to hear them talk about how, I mean, McCarry was actually one of the better pass
I
block win rate guys in the NFL, and Trevor Lawrence was not stepping up in the pocket. You need something
Yeah.
on the interior to incentivize him to step up into these throws a lot.
Well, and then going and getting Hainsey from Tampa, I think is like a decent pickup just because like there's a reason why like he was displaced by Graham Barton, who's a first round pick. You
Right.
know what I mean? So that's an explainable availability with a center.
And played well
And
in the game that he had to play in last year.
yeah, and so like I look at the way I look at it is like with them, they've done enough on the offensive line where they don't need to force it. They've got Walker Little on one side, they've got Anton Harrison, who's a first round pick for him on the other side. Like I look at them offensively and they don't really have to force anything. They don't have enough good players on the roster to pass up something truly special. Like if for some weird reason, like Abdul Carter falls to them, then like you just make it work,
Right.
But I think like this sets up, at least on the surface, for them to take Mason Graham there. And I think it makes a ton of sense. And if you think about it too, like you've got a couple of Rams guys there, and Liam Cohen, who was there twice. And obviously James Gladstone's the only place he's worked was the Rams. I mean, do they see I'm not comparing anybody to Aaron Donald, but do they see like a little bit of like the havoc wreaking,
Yeah.
undersized defensive tackle with Mason Graham? I think this sets up nicely for them to make Mason Graham the 5th overall pick.
And I'll say this a million times. Aaron Donald didn't become Aaron Donald until well after Pittsburgh, and because of all the independent work that he put in and
Yeah.
learning new pass rushing moves, constantly training himself, taking on all these things. And so if you can at least see the outline of it and maybe the characters there, I think that that's something that you make a move on, because this defensive interior is just costing them. And guys like Devin Lloyd, I think if you got some bangers at defensive tackle,
Yeah.
I think Devin Lloyd very quickly becomes one of the better interior linebackers in the NFL. Like every time you see him, that guy is doing something amazing on tape. I think it's just, I think the defensive line isn't really helping him out.
Bodyguards in front of them.
It's it. I mean,
Yeah.
and let's be real. I mean, Zach Bond had a great season last year, but like, how many times did we tie that to the fact that Jalen Carter was wiping out 3 or 4 offensive linemen on every single snap? And this is nothing against Zach, who learned the position, plays the position, is super versatile, can do a lot of things that Vic wants him to do. But again, you need that help at defensive line, and I think that's where it starts and it ends for Jacksonville for me. Indianapolis next. So I may stage a riot if they don't come out of here with the kid from Penn State, the tight end, or Loveland from Michigan.
So that was what I was thinking too. Like this
That's
just sets up too. Like they need another difference maker on offense, and
specifically at that position.
yeah, and they've got like to the point where I think they're on level ground at receiver with with Pittman and Pierce and Downs, right? Like so they're in a good spot there where they don't need to force anything. Obviously, they've got Jonathan Taylor at running back, and like so ideally, if you were going to add a difference maker on offense, it would be a tight end. And, I'm still a little worried about what's walking out the door on their offensive line. Like,
Sure.
I'm still a little concerned about that. Like, Braden Smith, by the way, anybody listening to this should go read the Indianapolis Star story on Braden Smith. It's incredible.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you read that, but it was
I did.
Mind blowing. But, with some questions on him coming back now, and then you lose Ryan Kelly and you lose Will Fries. And I know those guys were hurt during the year and everything else, but you're going to have to address the offensive line at some point in the draft. I just think at this point, like where they are and trying to get the most out of their quarterbacks, I feel like they've gotten to a point, especially like adding Travarius Ward. You hope you can get more from Leatu Latu, at the edge spot. It just sets up for them to wind up with a tight end. I don't think Tyler Warren's going to make it to them. They're at 15. Is that right?
They are at.
I think it's 15. It's like that. That to me is the Colson Loveland spot.
14. Yep.
Yeah, 14. So I'm dubious that Tyler Warren makes it that far. I think Colston Loveland probably that's probably like right in the sweet spot for him. And in a lot of ways, like I think kind of like he's a little bit of like a Dallas Clark type of tight end. Body type's different, but like kind of like use him the same way, where he can be a real weapon for you.
You know who Colston Loveland reminds me of? And I said this the other day, and people looked at me, I think like there was something wrong with me, but mostly because they don't remember the player, because the player ended up not playing football, is Jeff Samardzija from Notre Dame, but almost just a little bit bigger.
I like that.
Just a little bit, like a little bit bigger and a little bit thicker. So he's more of a natural blocker.
Like in today's NFL would be a move tight end and not a receiver.
No. So I'm kind of making it like a thicker Jeff Samardzija, like a Samardzija who would have played in line.
Yeah.
God, he should have played football. I mean, he was a great baseball player too.
Well, I mean, like, and you look at the money he made. It's like
that's true.
I think he made like quarterback money to be like a relief pitcher. So hard to argue with that.
Yeah, he did all right in that situation. Just one more quick point on the Colts, and then we're going to move on to the Texans.
Yep.
This is a big spotlight draft for Ballard because, I mean, we can all sit here and say tight end, and it makes sense. But, like, like you pointed out, a lot of this offensive line's unsettled. And then your front seven, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Tyquan Lewis, they're all entering the last year of their deals. DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart are 31. Like, you gotta, like, what's happening here? We have to replenish this thing. And so
Yep.
I think Ballard's got to hit this one out of the park. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Houston Texans, last team that we're going to talk about here in the AFC South. And I liked the offseason so far for Houston. I'm a big fan of organic builds and betting on the character of the room and betting on these guys as people, and then you figure everything else out. Maybe some other people freaked out that you let go of guys, your stalwart left tackle. You let go
Yep.
of, Stephon Diggs is walking now, and there's that perceived leadership void. But at the same time, I don't think so. As long as you get the right guys, I think you're empowering CJ Stroud and you're actually elevating him to another point. All that said,
Mhm.
if Laramie Tunsil's not there, you have to probably go offensive line to
Yep.
some degree, and maybe not necessarily even at that position, but you have to give yourself a little bit more flexibility at this point now.
Yeah, I think, and you look at like their draft picks, and I've got it up now because of the Tunsil trade. They've got 4 in the first 100 picks, 4 of the first 90 picks. So like they should have an opportunity to do that. And really, like tackle wasn't the issue last year; it was the interior of the offensive line.
Yes.
And
Is that
so, like,
Kenyon Green spot? Hmm.
right, right. So, like, what do they? What can they do as far as getting guards, centers? Like, is that? I mean, at the bottom of the first round, is that a Donovan Jackson maybe from Ohio State who can play left tackle, but it's really a guard? Somebody like that like could fit for them. And if you wind up with a guy who could be your long term left tackle, then great. What I do like about how they come out of this, because again, I think their defense could be dynamite. Like I think their defense could be really, really good. And we've talked about this, Connor. Like they have the culture defensively where they want it, and they
Hmm.
want to try to match that. And this is what the Tunsil trade was about to some degree, with a similar culture on offense. So, they bring in a couple of stopgap guys at tackle that they're not going to ask those guys to be leaders like Cam Robinson and Trent Brown. And it's like, let's figure out like what we're going to do going forward at this position with Blake Fisher, those two guys, and then draft picks. And then, kind of gives you some flexibility. If you think the best player available, the best lineman there is a guard, you can take the guard. You don't have to force it with the tackle. So like that's why I bring up somebody like Donovan Jackson potentially in the first or second round. So I think that's a big one. And then I think at some point, like, just because we, like the Tank Dell thing is interesting because it's
Yeah.
just like, are you going to have him at all this year?
Hmm.
I do think they've got decent depth at receiver with Christian Kirk coming over
Right.
and Barrios and Mechie, Justin Watson. So they've got numbers there. But is there somebody you want to put in like the receiver pipeline? Like that you can say, okay, like this guy doesn't need to play a huge role this year, but we'd like him to be like a complementary piece to Nico Collins. I think you'd be talking more like third, fourth round with that.
Um, yeah, the wide receiver thing, I was just kind of flipping through a couple mock drafts beforehand, and I saw a lot of wide receiver, wide receiver. I think this team has got to address like a flex offensive line position first because I
Yeah,
do
I
think
agree.
that's the strength of
Yep.
the class overall. And then maybe, like you said, you hit something on later in the draft.
And a running back isn't like crazy,
No,
a crazy thought either, just
because look at how
because.
much they fell apart without Joe Mixon when he wasn't in the
Yeah, and
lineup.
I think like Mixon at his age, he's going into year 9, I think it is now. Like
Hmm.
you're going to have to prepare for the eventual downturn in his career.
No doubt. You know who they should not think about passing is my guy. My Gruden grinder for the draft is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. I love
Oh,
that
I
guy.
like it. Yeah,
He
if you talk
plays
about
like
a culture,
he plays
culture
every
guy.
single position. Like he's
No,
he's he's awesome.
he would be perfect. Now I don't know if he'll make it to them, but he would be like he's Donovan Jackson plus some more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so he is like I think those two guys to me strike me as like, you want to fix the culture of your offensive line. Those two guys would be fits.